We pray to God anywhere. We pray to God anytime. We pray to God in any language, even in the toilet. Yes, Muslims don't like that when I say that, but my God is omnipresent. Why isn't their God there? Obviously, Islam is not in the toilet. If he's not in the toilet, then he's not in our bedroom. If he's not in our bedroom, he's not in our house. If he's not in the house, then where is he? I want a God that's with me. I want a God that can talk to me. I want a God that can speak my language. I want a God that I can talk to in any language, at any time, in any place, about anything. Because our God responds to our prayer. Am I correct? When we pray to him, we know he's going to respond. But the God of Islam, no. You're playing only one direction. Supplicating. Every day the same prayer. No response whatsoever. And you don't sing to God at all, do you? There's nothing to sing about. That's why Islam does not sing. But did you see these singers up here this morning? Weren't they great? Isn't that something that we can do? Look at the freedoms we have in Jesus Christ. Look at the freedoms we have, not only to sing to him, to pray to him, we can dance to him if we want to. Thank God, what a God we've got. And our God comes our direction. Our God comes and enters time and space. Our God speaks our language. Our God walks and talks with us. But I want to be back with him again. I want to be talked to him face to face. Don't you? So how's that going to happen? How's that going to happen, folks? Well, here comes the gospel. Eve. Madam, you're going to be my Eve. From your line, from Eve's line, someone's going to come. So someone's going to come from your line, right? We know that he's going to be known as the Messiah. We know that he's going to be the Son of God. We know that he's going to be the Son of Man. But more specifically, Isaiah tells us exactly who this person is. It's not just any woman. It's going to be a virgin. Behold, a virgin will conceive. In Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. So a virgin will conceive. Hold on a minute. Virgins don't conceive. Not in my world, they don't. If a woman is conceiving, she's no longer a virgin, right? So obviously there's something special about this woman. And Muslims need to know that. And Muslims do know that. And here is a bridge you can use with your Muslim friends. Because Muslims do know that in the Quran, there is one virgin in the Quran. Her name is Miriam. And it's in chapter 19, verse 20. In chapter 19, verse 20 of the Quran, Gabriel is coming to, actually starts with verse 19. He's coming to Mary, and he says, behold, I'm going to give you a righteous son. And then it says in verse 20, and referring to Mary the virgin. So in the history of mankind, there's only ever been one virgin that has conceived, and her name is Mary. So here is Isaiah 800 years earlier talking about this virgin. And he says, this will be the sign. Wake up, everybody. This is the miracle, is what he is saying. A virgin will conceive and bear a son. There's the man we're looking for that comes from the line of Eve. Here's the man that he's talking about. But who is this man that's conceived from a virgin? Who is he? He is to be called Emmanuel, God with us. When the virgin conceives, God is now on earth. He has come down to earth. Ooh, I love that, because that now says to me that something's going to happen here that's miraculous. And we know what's going to happen because Genesis 15 tells us, he, that one who comes from this woman, who is going to be a virgin, he will crush the head of Satan, and Satan will bruise his heel. So there has to be some bruising done. Why? Because we know in Leviticus chapter 17 that in order to have atonement, in order to rectify the sin that Adam and Eve did right at the very beginning, there has to be blood shed. There has to be life given. But whose blood and whose life? It has to be he who was sinned against. Who was sinned against in the Garden of Eden? We all know the answer. It was Jesus who was in the Garden of Eden, right? It was Jesus who was walking and talking in the cool of the day. It was Jesus who was face to face with Adam and Eve. It was Jesus who was in relationship with Adam and Eve. It was Jesus who was sinned against. And he is the one that's going to provide the solution. It has to come through a woman, because through a woman salvation will come. And his name is going to be Emmanuel, God with us. Ooh, that just gives me shivers up my spine. That's the kind of God we have. He condemns us for our sin. He then still gives us solution, and the solution is not going to be us. Because we sin all the time, day after day after day. We cannot, therefore, even eradicate and atone for our own sin. And we know this very clearly because we know the whole sacrificial system, which the Muslims are still doing today. They're still sacrificing today. I say to my Muslim friends, how and why do you still sacrifice? They say, because Abraham sacrificed. Well, why don't you go back to the story of Abraham, and why don't you see what happened at the very beginning? Let's go back to Genesis 15. Let's go back to the sacrificial time when God told Abraham to get 3 animals and 3 birds, to kill them, put them on a rock, and separate them so that he can make this covenant with Abraham. You remember this story? And what does he do? Abraham does exactly as God told him to do. He takes 3 animals, he takes 3 birds, he kills them, separates them, puts them on the rock. And according to the custom that Abraham knew all about, this is why God used this custom. Both parties were supposed to walk through, and the blood covenant that was then created was impingent on both parties. Am I correct? But Abraham never went through. God put Abraham to sleep. He would not allow Abraham to go through. Why? Because this covenant that God was making with Abraham, this covenant only God can do. This sacrifice, this blood sacrifice, can only come from God himself. God had to die for us. God had to shed his blood. God had to have his life taken. Ooh, what a God we have. He doesn't just walk and talk with us. He knows that we're going to sin. He knows we're hiding behind the tree. But when he meets us face to face, he looks at us and he really says, I've got to throw you from my presence, but I'm going to solve the problem. I'm going to come. I'm going to die. And on my shoulders, sin will be heaped. Folks, that's the beginning of the whole sacrificial system. That's why the Jews sacrificed. But they always knew, the Jews always knew that lamb was going to come, that the final sacrifice is going to come. And they always knew that he was going to be called the Son of God, that he was going to be called the Son of Man, that he was going to be called Yahweh, that he was also going to be called the Messiah. And they were waiting for the Messiah. They're still waiting for the Messiah. So who is this Messiah? Who is this Son of Man? Let's go to Matthew chapter 26. In Matthew chapter 26, Jesus was there in the Sanhedrin. He's being questioned by Caiaphas, the chief priest, a Jew, right? Chief priest of the Jews. And what does Caiaphas ask Jesus? He asks him 2 things. Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God? Not a Messiah. There were many Messiahs, but the Messiah, definite article, means only one. The Son of God, not a Son of God. We're all sons and daughters of God. But the Son of God, definite article, there was only one who was the Son of God. And he asked Jesus, are you these 2? How did Jesus respond? It is as you say. Yes, he accepted it. But he went on to the 3rd one. He says, and the Son of Man, referring to himself, will come and from everlasting to everlasting will have dominion over all tribes, nations, peoples, and tongue. By the time he claimed to be these 3 things, when you ask me, where does Jesus say I am God? He was saying it right here. Every time he claimed to be the Son of God, when he claimed to be the Messiah, when he claimed to be the Son of Man, he was saying, I am God, I am God, I am God, 3 times. Look at the reaction of Caiaphas. He tore his robe, turned towards the Sanhedrin, and said, what further proof do we need? This man has blasphemed. That's why he was put to death. He had to be put to death. Because here a mere man was claiming that the titles, the divine titles of God himself. A mere man was claiming God's divine titles. Oh, that's not the only time. In the temple, in John chapter 8, he's there in the temple. That means he's speaking Hebrew. And he's arguing with the Jews, and he's talking about Abraham. They turn towards him, and he says, how do you know Abraham? You're not even 50 years old. He responds, before Abraham was, I am. But that's in English. He didn't speak English. So what is he saying here in the temple? He is saying, Yahweh, Jehovah, I am who I am. He was claiming God's holy name, God's personal God name, God's eternal name. He was claiming it for himself. The Jews took up stones to stone him because you only stone someone who was blaspheming. He was claiming to be God himself right there in the temple. That's my Jesus. That's my Jesus. No wonder Muslims need to hear this. Muslims, you need to hear this, because this is something that you're missing. Your Garden of Eden, Muslims, is up in space, not on earth. Our Garden of Eden is on earth. Your God has never come to earth. And if your God has never come to earth, then how can he be God?